school. It's my second year as a judge and a coach. So we'll have the policy round start shortly, once the students are, ready to go. But you can be thinking as you're, observing the round, if you have any questions at the end, judges, students, anything that, we can answer.
Everybody ready? Plan. The United States federal government should remove country caps on first, second, and third preference employment-based visas. The first advantage is competitiveness. Entrepreneurs are looking to India and China because of bureaucratic red tape in the visa process. American Immigration Council 913. Although foreign entrepreneurs have consistently considered the U.S. a top destination, the U.S. immigration system forces them to leave. Entrepreneurs are choosing to start their businesses in countries that offer greater incentives. The U.S. is losing out on new businesses, jobs, tax revenue, and innovation that these entrepreneurs could be generating for the economy. Other countries persuade their own best are made at home while attracting talent from other nations. While working conditions are important to making decisions, so are red tape and bureaucracy in the visa process. And, in specific, the cap on high-skilled workers has not only hindered U.S. economic productivity, but also spurred political strife. Guest in 319. The U.S. capped admission of engineers, scientists, and programmers is costly and difficult for companies to justify the hiring of foreign people with talent. American industrialization rates are lower than numerous other countries, with greater emphasis on economic migrants. We turn away millions of professionals. We fail to compete at an international level. The costs are immeasurable. It's qualitatively true that American economic admissions of policies hinder high skilled migration more than other countries. Our failure to modernize has led to missed economic opportunities and inflamed political conflict. And the current system deters high skilled immigrants, removing the cap supercharges innovation in a variety of industries. Legion Greenwood 10. Employers deterred by the United States, professionals are subject to regulations until they receive their green cards. This prevents companies from the benefits that employees could provide. Releasing restricted software or technology to foreign nationals is deemed an export to foreign countries' national home, subject to such release to any licensing requirement that would apply a natural transfer to that country. Preventive measures isolate foreign nationals would significantly diminish their contributions. Inhibits innovation, increases costs. Regulation cannot affect countries which are directly involved in industries of military defense, medicine, agriculture, chemistry, and computer science. Willingness to pay for the green card process is a key factor to the time of offering which a potential foreign employee will take a job. Employers may find themselves paying thousands in attorney fees and attorney fees. Companies have to perform numerous renewals of H-1Bs and H-4s with the expensive cost of fees to renew visa same to pay attorney fees. The first scenario is growth. Abolishing the cap makes growth sustainable. That's key to competitive job creation. Legion Greenwood 10. EPA is contributing the economy by driving innovation, founding businesses contributing skills that are unmatched by the U.S. workforce and should therefore be welcomed in times of economic growth as well as economic decline. The U.S. faces competition for developing countries. Employers believe that the time to have a global talent pool should choose some critical to their ability to compete in the global economy. Foreign workers are important drivers of innovation and economic growth, even when the economy begins to slow. The departure of top talent in technology and science may undercut the process for economic recovery. Skilled immigrants contribute substantially to the economy. Far from competing with domestic workforce, they create jobs. Reverse rendering, the cap of immigration is hinders to economic growth. Companies in the U.S. resulting in job loss for U.S. workers, so while companies which cannot move lose talent toward competitors. The cap deters immigrants and new temporary legal arrivals have dropped. American immigration policy is driving away the world best and brightest precisely when we need them the most. And economic growth is empirically and statistically proven to resolve most conflict. Court in 16. Connecting development and peace are supported by research representing on the cause of warfare and strong connection with low income and armed conflict. The key root of cause conflict is serious economic development. Raising conflict and growth rates may be the single most important step that we take, and wars undermines economic well-being. Reduce life expectancy and restores dedicated public health systems. And otherwise, economic decline would risk every global crisis. Poison in 9. U.S. power based on American economic science and success that enables the U.S. to promote economic growth and increasing international economic integration. This produces prosperity at home and abroad on one that would bring the benefits to other countries following the American system. The most successful countries with military alliances. Global financial orders represent the challenge of the world order has remained for the U.S. leaders to global financial system not be it or sustainable reform. Financial system will come under strain. The second scenario is leadership. American technological leadership is eroding. This heralds total collapse of American hegemony. Economists in 2015. Others counting up. America's harness technology to offset this rival advantage, but these technologies are now proliferating. China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea have been making rapid progress. Armed forces have been growing more sophisticated, the government is becoming more assertive. China could even threaten American bases. American power remains the best guarantee of rules and international order from which all countries benefit. And innovation is key to reverse the decline of global leadership. Steinbach in 2015. The U.S. is at risk of losing its military edge. America's technological leadership is far from mature. If huge defense innovation continues to erode America's defense capabilities will suffer. The country will also risk slipping into the commercial innovation and competitiveness. And American hegemony is the most effective answer to global crises. Interest on military, diplomatic, and economic preeminence assures global stability. Bill Kramer and Wolf 413. Military dominance undergirds the economic leadership, securing the global economy much harder than the United States wields its serious ability to shape the structure of the global economy, ensuring the responsibility will face benefits at risk. There is leadership benefits in many countries, but disproportionately at the United States. Right, at the United States. Alright, ready for cross. 150.
We can cut the cross sections in half, yeah, just so we have enough time.
Yeah, how much prep do we have? What would they say if anything?
That would also be 2 minutes and 30 seconds, right?
That's rough. Okay.
Okay, on the first advantage,
Yeah.
it talks about how growth is going to be sustainable. It's the first lead, or the second Leach and Greenwood 10 card. It talks about the problem the U.S. now faces is that fewer skilled employees are choosing to immigrate, and the United States faces competition for skilled workers from other developed countries, which is a reason why we have a lack of qualified workers. How does the plan make the United States compete with other countries who are attracting immigrants?
Okay, so specifically, the reason that we're not able to compete now is because of the red tape and the bureaucratic process within visas. People and companies have to
So there's red tape and bureaucratic processes. The plan text only removes country caps. How does that get rid of any the bureaucratic red tape?
Okay, so country caps are part of the bureaucratic process, and the fact that you can't get into the U.S. when your country has a giant cap. This means no more than 7% of all immigrants can come from your country.
It's you still don't get rid of a lot of the reasons why people are deemed as inadmissible. For example, the card goes on to say certain intending immigrants are choosing these countries over the United States where they can be more certain of acquiring permanent status if they so do wish. How does the plan increase the chance of them acquiring permanent status if it only increases the country caps? It doesn't get rid of any the inadmissibility standards.
Okay, we're not talking about inadmissibility standards in specific. We're talking about the fact that what the card is talking about is that people avoid the United States as a reason to get in because they don't get permanent status
The
because of
Corvette card
country.
talks about how econ growth is sustainable, but the card actually talks about it's indicative of poverty as a reason why there's conflict. What's the connection between econ growth and conflict then?
Wait, sorry.
What?
Setting it up now. It'll be 2 off and case in the order of case, and then you're gonna wanna do the vote results. Did everyone get it?
Yeah.
Okay, my Wi-Fi's kind of slow, sorry about that.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, everyone good to go? Yes. Cool. First off is the R&D counter plan. Text. The United States federal government should substantially increase funding for research and development in basic technologies and technological infrastructure for private sector American companies. The counter plan is key to economic growth and resiliency. If we kick it, it becomes an alt-cost to the app. Key 17. Almost 2/3 of technology with the most impact stem from federally funded R&D. It's also on new products that save and improve lives. All of these advantages relied on federal investment combined with university research lab expertise. Thousands of companies can trace their roots to federally funded university research. Most university graduate thousands of undergraduate students who provide a constant supply of educated, trained workers. The universities and federal R&D investment benefit from the active engagement and monetary support of business leaders and professionals. Innovative ideas and knowledge prolonging back and forth between federally funded research and the private sector. The nation's most active innovation hubs and successful regional economies drive economic growth and resiliency, including top-tier research institutions supported by federal, state, and private funding. Second is the midterms. They said Dems win midterms, but it's close. Bernstein 928. With Democrats still more likely to get 218 and a majority than not, that's only polls-based prediction system. Expect a Democratic majority, but don't be too surprised if Republicans hold on. The margin of error remains very large. Don't trust anyone who says the majority is locked up for Democrats. And major Dem gains key to constrain Trump's foreign policy. Canonius 17. There are almost no judicial checks on the president's foreign policy, and the checks within the administration are minimal. 2018 rout by Republicans riding Trump coattails, and the parroting his message would further diminish the majority party's resistance and dwindle the number of critical senators, keeping the administration from usurping all power to decide matters of war. Results favoring Democrats could indicate a booming midterm backlash against Trump. With the weak pretends a Democratic sweep next year, Congress will make sure administration bad actors are investigated. Trump could become an emperor with no clothes. And unrestrained Trumpian foreign policy causes multiple scenarios for war. Rotner 17. Trump's ad hoc chaotic foreign policy stands to do the most change. Trump is now planning an aggressive trade campaign against China. Trade with China will be an obstacle to diplomatic efforts to enlist China's support in dealing with North Korea. Trump is now attempting to sabotage the deal. Trump will have succeeded in isolating America. Iran will walk away from its obligation to abandon its nuclear program. The greatest damage is with our allies. Case. U.S. and Germany causes Russian counterbalancing and NATO belligerence. Goes nuclear coup, modernization, miscock, and Russian belligerence. Osborne 17. Russia's military maneuvers assess the pace of Russia's military modernization. Russia has postured itself in response to NATO counterbalance to deter the alliance. Russia's economic pressures have not flowed. Military modernization. Russia's transition into higher tech NATO would be unable to withstand a Russian invasion on something the Baltic region would have NATO with a few options, including massive risky counterattack threatening nuclear weapons. And hegemony leads to global wars. Banner 17. U.S. efforts focus on achieving hegemony, escalating tensions, instability, and conflict. U.S. pitted Israel against the Arab neighbors. U.S. props on Persian Gulf states with fuel regional terrorism that destabilize an entire nation. U.S. created and perpetuate chaos. Now NATO serves as a cover for expanding U.S. hegemony, revealing a pretext for unjustified aggressive flight. U.S. stability manifests in failed states, perpetual violence and conflict that unjustified aggressive front further escalation. U.S. fuel opposition in Asia. U.S. efforts to cooperate regional political orders have failed. Submarine conflicts remain. Korean Peninsula. America's presence continues to drive instability, keep states pitted against one another, undermining stability. U.S. seeks hegemony, not stability. It requires the division and destruction of competitors. We can expect an equal but opposite decline in instability. And economic downturns don't cause conflict. Stats proof. Player 15. Do economic downturns generate conflict? Economic stresses associated with conciliatory policies. Drawing data from 109 Bible dyads, 67 of which terminated evidence suggests rivalries with prices likely to terminate during downturns. Controlling for a mean alternative explanation for peaceful relations to systemic changes as well as other confounding variables. The question existed theories claiming downturns are associated with diversionary war in August space might result from economic issues, and competitiveness doesn't matter to the economy. Carbon 94. From 1979 to 1988, the real compensation of U.S. workers rose by 5.8%, while productivity with 5.1% productivity is not measured around relative to the other countries. We got the growth in living standards and would have gotten the U.S. would have alone in the world that we need to be productive in order to compete in the global economy is wrong. Being less productive in your trading partner poses no problem, and how fast productivity is going abroad, whether we are ahead or behind is irrelevant. And on solvency, immigration policy is not the largest contributing factor. Plan can't solve. Curve 13. We know the return migration from the U.S. is happening. Mark the card happening.
Sorry, what card did you on that?
Mark, care, and happening. Good for our course?
Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry, my computer just shut down. Crazy. Yep. Where's the one here? It's right here. Okay. Alright, so your impact card on midterms talks about like, it was from 2017 and it talks about like, Trump having like trade wars with China and like talking about Iran. How have those like not already happened yet?
Okay, so we'd argue that he's building up the power to have this trade war with China and like slowly implementing it, but any midterm success would like reinforce.
Okay, so like
his
he's
ability
already
to do
slowly
that.
implementing it?
He's already slowly doing it, but the midterm success
Okay, so
would
he's slowly
like
okay,
expedite it.
So why doesn't immigration policy solve?
In the solvency,
Yeah.
we're saying that immigration isn't like the most important part. This card talks about how like, yes, high-skilled immigration could impact the economy, but there are many other factors that impact the economy that means that the app won't be able to.
Okay, sure. So you say that like R&D solves, right?
Mhm.
So how does it solve for like specifically being able to increase the amount of entrepreneurs? So, like you can like increase the amount of funding, but how can you increase the amount of people that use funding and research to do things?
This card, the Keen card, makes the argument that there are already plenty of people working in universities who are like ready to do this research but don't have the funding to do it. So we solve for that like shortage, and either way, like we'd argue that we have a different internal link.
Okay, sure. So, okay, you say U.S. hegemony causes Russia counterbalancing. How does Russia counterbalance?
Like going against the actions of NATO because they see it like keep happening. Like the U.S. and NATO keep like joining forces and like going against Russian actions. So
Okay, how is this like going with NATO?
Okay, we will. Let's say.
documents. Let me just one of them.
We'll have 105 left?
Okay, send it over. There's some midterms cards that I put in the document, but also Nikhil got some.
And you can just like reply on like twice.
Yeah. Okay, the order is comp and then CP then midterms.
Can you go on the song detail?
Look, this is 4 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, is everyone ready? Okay, starting. No, okay, they say first hedge causes the 100 turn, that's the Osborne 618 card. Absent this, meet the impact is extinction, that's Barnett 11 card. American side of the crossroads and continuing evolution as the world's sole service cost superpower. The U.S. military has been the greatest force for peace the world has ever known. Had America be removed from global dynamics to govern the 20th century, the mass murder network globalization of the U.S. military has been the greatest force for peace the world has ever known. Had America been removed from global from once nuclear weapons entered the killing equation, but the world did not keep sliding down the path of perpetual world have ended. There were no identical human civilization left. Once nuclear weapons entered the killing equation, but the world did not keep sliding down the path of perpetual war. Instead, America stepped up and changed everything by ushering in now perpetual great power war. Peace. We introduced the international liberal trade order known as globalization, a tenfold increase in adjusted global GDP, and a profound persistent reduction in biodust from state-based conflict. Calculated to 90% low absolute drop, 99% low drop in deaths due to war. So hedge is actually stopping war, and it's a good thing. Then they say hedge leads to global war. Hedge doesn't lead to global war. That deters other countries from starting structural warfare. Is the overhauling power. That's the Brooks and Eikenberry 13 card. Then they say economic downturn that causes conflict. Economic downturn does cause conflict. That's their pros and 9 card. Then they say that competition doesn't matter and competition is bad. Trade deficits because really combinatory jobs increases industrialization, drains demand, and macroeconomic distortions. Competition is critical to the economy. Bernstein, Baker 16. The trade deficit during the acquired rise of trade deficits spread demand in domestic economy. Deficit is serious on demand does not serve a strong economy. Pushing is limited. Trade deficits have a negative impacts on quantity, quality, and voluntary. China led to lost more than 2 million U.S. jobs. Trade imbalances have repercussions far beyond the labor market that produce significant macroeconomic distortions. A trade deficit can have a role in producing financial market bubbles and devastation that's called when the bubbles burst. Trade deficit means the loss of good jobs, wages, and income for those hit by any competition. From export international trade, they yield many benefits to consumers and workers both in the U.S. and abroad. So competition does matter. It stops econ decline. Econ decline is bad. Moving on to the counterplan, perm do both are not mutually exclusive. We can still increase our research and development while still doing the plan. Public R&D funding crowds up private funding decreases growth. Keely 13. No economic benefit. Public funded R&D had no impact. For adverse affect private output, damage economic growth. Public funding research had no beneficial effects on the economy. It's not 75% of the cost. Large and copying is lengthy, especially if it involves the acquisition of tacit and knowledge. People can't simply read a paper or read a patent or strip down the new product and then to copy the innovation. And public innovation is net worth for innovation. Keely 13. And still need to describe crowding out, need to describe non-balanced societies, negative unchanneable superpowers of the day research would concentrate in industry, and there would be an armamentarium of private philanthropic funders of university. And their evidence is controlled by big businesses, that's Keely 13, who benefit from the pictures of economies of science, the economics, university, and deference contractors who benefit at the taxpayers' expense, power of ideas is extraordinary. And again, so if we have R&D, we can increase funding to R&D, but it still wouldn't have any effect because the adverse effects that they're talking about aren't there. Moving on to midterms. Okay, so they start with Dems in the midterm now. Actually, no, GOP favorability is higher than midterm, Baker 925. Republicans' favorability has points in January, according to political poll released on Monday, shows that 45% have a favorable view of the party since retook Congress. Since more favorable impression of the party, not compared to Democrats are being high. Republicans are more likely to vote party favorably than a year ago, positive indicator for the party. And Okay, it's a repeat of the same card. Moving on, Kavanaugh overwhelms the news with the app, constant new allegations and vote in the next week, and Biden 914. Because politicians tend to be completely ignorant of these arrangements, voters don't ask for them, they don't know what to ask, we are focused on the demand side and the one congressional hearing. And so basically we're saying, midterms is that they're saying that, the immigration issues right now in the news are super big right now. No, they're not. Kavanaugh and the entire hearing is overwhelming that. So right now voters are looking more to that and that's the most in their mind right now. GOP will keep the House. Dems way won't translate to see gerrymandering and come in authority and 611. I'm not sure will wrestle control of the way from the majority usually to the intolerable disparity between voters and leaders of storing gerrymandering and showing unreasonable that Democrats win. 23 states gain the disparity, no minority has done better than 8.5 win. And GOP holds on economy, it's key. Jungle verse 612. Historical outcomes have been possible. The income has started rising, gas prices, material millions, jobs have been created, and tax on the house has improved. Voters have been likely to the prior administration. And the wave will be contained. Trend says the blue wave might be high, with Republican chance to improve dramatically. And the president's pool gets out. Tax rate and generic battle doesn't come on the scale for Republicans. And also, even if they win the House, they still won't win the Senate, so the impeachment trial will never go through anyway. Okay, moving on to cross. Can I have water? Do you have water?
Okay, you good?
Yeah.
Alright, cool. Starting on this Finder card you read, it's from an article called How Obama Made It Easier for Trump to Launch a Nuke. Maybe we should talk about this.
It's not saying that okay, we're just saying that the Kavanaugh news in the recent Kavanaugh's trial is so big right now.
The highlight around this one congressional hearing. The congressional hearing they're talking about is in the context of nuclear weapon usage. So why exactly is this indicative of literally the word Kavanaugh is just not in here.
It's just talking about the hearing is a really big issue, and it's trumping out immigration policy
This
or
is talking about a
immigration hearing.
completely different hearing. This has
Congressional
nothing.
hearings do have a big effect on the way.
So which congressional hearing is it? Is it the Kavanaugh hearing or is it the hearing?
I think it's talking generically about hearing.
I'd still say
It's really not.
the logic applies to the Kavanaugh hearing as well.
Because because it's just a hearing Kavanaugh's talking about, and it's a really big thing in the news. It's just overwhelming.
Okay. For your engine card, it says gerrymandering and various other things
Mhm.
will block the GOP from keeping the House. So if key states like Pennsylvania have redone their maps since the writing of this card, why is it still?
Well, just because a couple states are doing it doesn't mean that every state. That's not going to overwhelm. GOP will keep the House because even though gerrymandering is being improved, it's not being approved fast enough for the GOP to lose the House or anything like that.
Okay. This says that the GOP. No, we're good.
So they split the block into different parts.
Okay. The order is the R&D kind of plan. And then solvency. And then advantages in the order of the scenario goes hedge and then econ decline.
Could you repeat that?
R&D, solvency, hedge, econ.
Okay, other cards.
Yeah, I sent. I also have water if you want after, that's fine. Is anyone not ready? On the account plan, the account plan solves the entirety of case and avoids the net benefit by increasing funding for research and development in basic tech and tech infrastructure in the U.S. private sector, ensures that there's an increase in competitiveness by driving new innovations. Federal funding is key to a myriad of industries, and it's the only way to maintain consistent growth and higher productivity. And they say perm do both. You can't perm do both because it still includes the plan. Any inclusion of the plan still links to all the net benefits, which is a hedge term, and the midterms to that. They say crowds out private spending. No, it just says that the card says that there's no economic benefits, but HEAN 17 proves that it's useful because it's able to support research and development, especially to universities who have the people that are able to actually create these new innovations. They say public funding works for innovations. There's no warrants of this card. It just says that government funding crowds out private philanthropic funding of science industries. But no, that's more arbitrary and it's worse. We should prefer public funding of this. And they say that it's able to control, all of our evidence is controlled by big businesses. No, it doesn't indict any of our specific authors, which means that there's no reason why you should be able to disprove any of our studies. And federally funded R&D is the hallmark of U.S. industries. On this in 16. 2/3 of the most influential technologies are supported by federal R&D. The federal government does more than produce new products. By fostering innovation translates to new productivity. Where the Trump administration should seek to improve the local economic impact of federal R&D. The U.S. once led the world in governmental funded R&D intensity. In the middle of the 20th century, voters who elected themselves federal R&D is the necessary condition. Local and economic clusters encourages innovation leads to higher productivity. On to solvency. First, increasing surges in immigration applications means that USCIS gets even more overwhelmed. It creates uncertainty in potential applicants and means that less people will apply. USCIS is currently responsible for processing every application for people to come in. Staffing, allocating resources to USCIS is minimal. They're in the middle of a tech innovation transition, and up to this point, they process immigration by hand and are barely functioning right now, i.e. they have literally given out green cards on accident because of processing errors and rejected qualified applicants because of a bureaucratic paper myth. And increased backlogs increase the chance of deportation and causes anxiety among immigrants, meaning less of them will apply in the first place. See Spivak in 18. The backlog grew 40%. The backlog creates a second wall. Aside from ensuring that personal security sensitive applicants have want the right to vote, green cards are not secure. The government could change reasons for revoking green cards and rules could be unevenly applied. The anxiety and pressure applicants are feeling is palpable. Onto the hegemony impact. Increasing American pressure through hegemony on Russia and China leads them to form a strategic partnership to balance against the U.S. leadership. They'll perceive any innovations as an attempt to increase American dominance. That outweighs and turns case. Expanding the military while China and Russia are making counter moves makes miscalculation and escalation uniquely likely, and that has a higher magnitude. It changes the cost-benefit analysis and makes war more devastating through stronger weapons. And that turns their thesis, China and Russia will always push for dominance that will inevitably cause instability and war. And hedge interventionism fails and causes more authoritarianism, extremism such as terror. Samuel 17. The American-led liberal international order fails to generate legitimacy in the international world. The Iraq war significantly undermined legitimacy of American leadership in international order. The U.S. is building a nation in Iraq after dismantling and destroying all state institutions to be the breeding ground for all forms of extremism, authoritarianism, authoritarianism. They say that extinction is going to be possible absent hedge, but global interventionism is going to be creating all the wars in the first place, which is the turns to their impact. That was above. And onto econ decline. They say that econ decline is going to cause for conflict. They read the Panskin 16 card, but no, that card is context of trade. The app does not uniquely increase trade, which means that there's no internal linkage to this, but there's no impact to econ decline. Prefer new data. Dresden 14. Analysis asserted that financial crisis leads states to use of force through diversionary wars, armed races, and great power conflicts. The average data suggests otherwise. The average level of peacefulness in 2012 is the same as in 2007. Interstate violence has declined as the military expenditures. Studies confirm that the recession has not triggered any violent conflict. The crisis is not generated by protectionism, nationalism, or ethnic conclusion. Should also extend the Clarity 15 card because it talks about how during times of econ decline, countries are more likely to cooperate together. It means that there's going to be decreases in spending of military spending, as an example, which is the reason why conflicts are uniquely less likely in the world where there is econ decline.
Now, okay, you were saying that there's an increasing and surging and that the UCIS would get overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
How much of a backlog is it right now?
I believe that there's a pretty bad backlog in the status quo right now. It's a backlog not in the sense that there's more people applying than there are caps. By raising the caps, you only make the backlog that USCIS has to process even worse.
Okay, so how many immigrants coming to the United States would trigger the UCIS getting more?
It's not a question of what's triggering. It's the question of how many people the increase the number of people allowed in, because that means that USCIS.
So is there a specific, if we're just getting rid of the quota, the cap, doesn't guarantee how many people are coming to the
you're
United
getting rid of
States?
EBs 1, 2, and 3, so that's a massive influx that USCIS has to process. That means that people are still going to have to wait for even longer periods of time in order for their visas, example, to be processed and approved. Which means that people will have increased anxiety because they know they won't be able to get the visa within the next 10 years.
Okay. onto, like you were saying, hedge bad, that's the cause of Russia and China countermeasures. How likely are Russia and China going to come together for a countermeasure against American tech leadership?
Extremely likely. That was like in the 1 and C.
Okay.
It talks about how any increases in American dominance means that Russia and China want to counterbalance that
But America
dominance.
has been already like making advances, and Russia and like China like coming together as counterbalance haven't been seen before.
Well,
Why
no,
is
it's
that
specific
triggered?
to also like the innovation component of that because Russia and China can work together on that specifically.
I'm sending the codes out now, there are only 2 of them, so I'm just putting it in the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah, this is 2. I know these people are interested in some.
Okay, is everyone good?
Yeah, I got it.
Alright,
Oh, okay. That's a years ago. It's in the bottom now. Oh, it's in the bottom. Alright.
alright, cool. Starting on midterms, the discount outweighs and turns the case. Trump calls his extinction through environmental destruction, escalatory nuclear war, protectionism, and ignored backsliding. A Republican win legitimizes Trump's abusive authority. Legislative checks are key to restrict Trump's chaotic foreign policy. Outweighs on timeframe and magnitude. The plan is immediately perceived by voters, but immigration process and economic development takes years. Trump's foreign policy triggers war before the plan gets solved. Timeframe determines the direction of Trump's dissent impact is faster, which means there's only a risk of the dissent turns case, not the other way around. They turn leadership because Trumpian politics subverts any attempts to build legitimacy and international credibility. His volatility destroys allies' confidence, which decks hegemony and rollback. Trump reverts to hardline stance post-plan. He strengthens immigration restrictions, which triggers their internal link. And Trump's hardline stance on immigration guarantees Dem win. Extend Bernstein, it's the most recent evidence because Democrats. It says the Democrats win and it's likely, but some margins of error in polling means you shouldn't assume it's inevitable. They read this poll that says the GOP is higher than Dem. No, this is a favorability poll, not a poll about how people are actually going to turn out in the election. Democrats are up 4% in a generic ballot. Then they go on to these thumper arguments, but no, the link controls the direction of uniqueness. The mandate should change the outcomes from the status quo, guarantees vote switching. The app is only shifted, and all thumpers are priced into uniqueness, and the plan is perceived as popular with key voter groups. The Republicans will take credit for a liberal policy, which determines Dems win or swing voters flip their votes. And there's no Kavanaugh thumper. It will be over by tomorrow, and people have already decided how they feel about it. It's a referendum on Kavanaugh, not the parties, and this card is literally not about Kavanaugh. It's about a separate congressional hearing. And on the link debate, the Trump administration is taking a hardline stance on immigration policy, which fractures the base. The app's reversal gets Democrats and Republicans on board with Trump, which flips the election. That's Bernstein. And the plan is the opposite of Trump's policy. It literally gives jobs to people from other countries and gets rid of limits. That convinces liberals he's changing and reduces their incentive to vote. They say that the GOP will be able to keep the House, but no, the incumbent effect isn't true because otherwise no new people would be elected. And gerrymandering is solved by recent maps being redone. And then they say that the GOP is controlling the econ, but no. Trump will make immigration the key internal link. Lucy et al. 18. Trump sees hardline immigration as a winning issue. Trump believes his pledge has helped him win the presidency. Of course, supporters remain on the president's side. Mark the clock at side, and he says that. They say that the wave will be contained, but no, this is before the primaries, which means they can't tell the strength of the Democratic candidates that are running. And then they say that there's no Senate argument, but no, we're not making an impeachment scenario, we're making a Trump war scenario, and Republican-controlled Congress lacks sufficient checks on his detrimental foreign policy. His actions on rhetoric have destabilized and challenged institutional engagements and increased tensions within nuclear-capable countries like China and Iran. That's Wagner.
I'll take a little bit. Can you read anything? What's the number? Do you have an app? Would you have one? I have one back. He's really no Alright, the order is gonna be case and then case, solvency, the counterplan, and the midterms. My laptop. Okay. One or two, yeah, these two. Sorry, we're gonna hear the US.
Good.
Wait, I have to go to the doctor. That's just what cards. You got it. Alright, there's gonna be a quick overview on top of the case flow. Alright, we're winning this debate right now because the leadership and growth scenarios outweigh midterms. Leadership solves global war and the crisis which preempts our responses to midterms. Trump starts something with other countries who have the largest impact on the round with the largest magnitude. On growth, the only way to stop economic decline is to have skilled immigrants. That's proposal 9. On leadership, the only way to stop global war leading to extinction is with hegemony. That's the Barnett 11 card. Midterms isn't even likely because things to trigger Trump have already happened and the impact of midterms didn't happen. Okay, on the case line by line. Alright, so they try to tell you that economic decline doesn't work and that we don't actually increase we don't increase trade, which means we don't increase deficits. No, the card that we talk about in the 2AC talks specifically about how trade deficits are critical to the economy, and a decline in the economy leads to a decline in trade deficits, and we're not able to support the economy that way. That means we still make the economy better. And then they say that there's like no impact to the economy, but like that card that they have talks about protectionism and specifically ethnic exclusion, not talking about the overall economy. It's talking about the Great Recession, not the way an economic piece of economic decline now in terms of leadership and specifically innovation would affect us now. Then they say the recession proves. No, the recession doesn't prove because it doesn't take into account innovation and the specific political climate that's happening now. And the recession affected many countries. This is just going to be the U.S. is declining. Okay, so they say that there's going to be like authoritarian and like terror, and there's going to be and like using hedge, there's going to be interventionism, and that causes like Russia backlash and things like that. But no, there's no link to interventionism because we don't actually increase intervention. We just increase the amount that we, as a country, look to other countries. That means we still solve. And if we prove that there's a risk of economic decline leading to saving the global order, as well as extinction, which is the Barnett 11 card, we win the round because it doesn't impact us to solve midterms. Then on solvency, they said that the USCIS and they had this backlog argument, but the backlog argument doesn't work out. It doesn't work out because we increase the amount of country caps. There's no specific reason why EB visas inherently aren't able to. Why EB visas why they can speed it up, and we increase the country caps, not specifically increasing the amount of people coming in per se. We make sure that the people coming in are from India and people that have entrepreneurs and places that want to come in. Okay. On the counterplan, the perm still works. If we can prove that there's no link to midterms, it doesn't work. And remember, there's no warrant to a public funding bad card. Yes, there is a warrant. It talks about how public funding doesn't actually work because it's not key to the economy. What? I have more time.
Okay, sorry, our time was supposed to be.
I had 2:30.
Yeah, it's 2:30, right?
No. What? I have like.
Whatever,
Yeah.
just go for like 15 seconds.
It's total 5 minutes, so it's half.
I thought it. Oh man.
Yeah.
Oops. Thought I had like time.
The opposite of the same, okay?
Absolutely opposite.
Yeah.
Minute 1 hour 7:05. I had like 45 seconds left. What did you say? 2:30.
Wait, that's 3 to 7 seconds left. No, you didn't.
That's how we go about
We had responses. What are you talking about? Oh.
Just no.
No, let's.
We're good.
Your best really could happen.
Why did you move the other table?
Yeah.
I can see it bending a little.
Just
No.
Yeah, it's like
Some books.
It's real.
Okay, I'm gonna come up here and like.
No, it's stable. Like it, yeah, because my laptop's a lot heavier than yours.
True.
Okay.
When you're done, I'm gonna grab it though.
The order is the R&D kind of plan, the midterm disadvantage, the solvency flow, the hedge impact, and the econ impact. Is anyone not ready? Can see the permutation of the R&D counter plan, but use it as an all cost. Lack of R&D funding is another reason why the plan doesn't solve for any of the innovation impacts, midterms. The dissent outweighs in terms of the case. It ensures that Republicans win by removing immigration as a budget issue. It becomes settled, so Democrats have no motivation to vote. That decks absolvency. They straight concede the dissent and the 1AR, which means you shouldn't allow for new 2A arguments. That also means that you should prefer tech over truth on this issue because it proves that the dissent already outweighs any arguments on case. Trump will have full control. Leads to disastrous foreign policy. Only Democratic gains can prevent him by stopping him from war with Congress and Senate and not passing bills that would cause things like China trade war. They can't do that. They're the minority party. 1. China war is inevitable within the Trump scenario. He'll engage in trade war. That's Rother. 2. Foreign policy causes World War III. It leads in econ decline, and that's empirically proven. You should prefer our time frame. You can only die once. We have the closest and shortest time frame because the plan immediately swaps voter opinions so that by November Trump has reassured his complete control of the government. And it turns off case. Trump reverts hardline stance post-plan. He strengthens immigration restrictions which triggers all of their internal links. And the internal link is key. A strong uncontested link means you don't value any of the thumpers. The plan's reversal of Trump's policy, which reduces the needs for liberals to oppose him. It reduces Dem turnout, which flips the election to him and causes the litany of impacts. On to the case debate. First, the USCIS impact. That's an easy presumption ballot. Any exacerbating backlogs means that uncertainty is heightened and deters potential immigration applicants because they're not going to be sure if they're actually going to get a visa or not. The backlog creates a second wall for applying to immigration in the first place. The anxiety, the pressure applicants feel is palpable, feedback 18, which is an independent reason why immigrants won't be applying to visas here in the first place. Onto the hedge debate. The pursuit of hedge encourages costly military policies that waste resources and American esteem is undermined among foreign countries when they see the U.S. is trying to influence their policy. Trying to build hedge builds up resentment and causes all the litany of impacts, such as the Russia-China counterbalancing. And it'll cause cyber and economic warfare and leads to the escalation of nuclear weapons. Something all three countries have is a massive stockpile ready to use from. We also control time frame on this issue. They say that they don't increase intervention on some hedge. The hedge that increases directly leads to global influence, which is the equivalent of intervention itself. Onto the econ debate. First, there's no impact to econ decline. There's 5 warrants. 1, less aggressive rivalries. Clarity considers all alternate explanations, i.e. nuclear weapons, common enemies, international system changes, but includes that rivalries are twice likely to terminate during economic downturns. 2 is austerity. Econ declines diminished revenues for government expenditure, which means there's less likely that they're going to be causing any increases in defense spending, which means less military interventions. And 3, strategic reassessments. Leaders are encouraged to find new ideas and new ways to find peace rather than engage in military conflict during times of econ decline.
It's gonna be competitiveness, just in the order of growth and leadership, then measures. Solvency, yeah. Okay, is everyone ready? Do you have cards or like stuff from you at the end?
Yeah.
Nice. Starting now, we're waiting to debate for the main reason that leadership and growth outweigh midterms with R&D not being able to solve it. Like keep that anyway. On leadership and growth scenarios, the econ decline causing many different impacts, including war and lower quality of living without hedge. On magnitude, global war affects many different people across many different countries, with the impact actually being probable. With the idea that Trump has already had situations that should have triggered him and caused like conflict that nothing has happened in the first place. Go for truth over tech. Go for the argument that makes sense, not because of some policy jargon. On time frame, but actually, if we go with the plan, we're stopping the econ decline from happening. If the second econ decline happens, global war immediately and sure happens. And on the midterm solution, they said like the second, if we don't impeach Trump, then sometime in the future, in some scenario, that he'll cause like lash out and then he'll get mad and that'll cause global war. The entire midterms hinges on whether or not Trump is in a bad mood or not. On competition, they say like hedge is bad again, hedge is not bad, it turns out other countries are fine. Russia and China won't cause counterbalancing to the US hedge. We've been consistently increasing US hegemony, yet nothing has happened with Russia and China. Without hegemony, decline would happen, causing global war. So basically they're saying like they have like some data turns on the case flow, saying that like competition doesn't matter and econ doesn't cause conflict in the first place. That's just not true. That look at hedge doesn't link to global war. It deters other countries from fighting with an opportunity of power that's broken in Itinerary 13. And also econ decline does cause conflict. That's posed in 9. So if you're looking at it from a perspective of the app, looking at econ decline is the biggest impact in the round, so you have to go for the affirmative. Moving on to leadership. American tech leadership is eroding. That's our Economist 15 card. If we do not increase high-skilled immigrants, our leadership will erode. And even though you're saying that hegemony is bad in the first place, no, it's not. We've been consistently increasing hegemony, yet nothing has happened with the Russia and China scenario, which they consistently have said is their main point against the hegemony argument, so that's just false. Moving on, actually I'm going to do a little more on leadership. American hegemony is the most effective answer to global crisis, military, diplomatic, and economic permanence. That's the book's 1913 card. Again, so like innovation key, basically if we don't have these high skilled immigrants, then we're just cutting the quota, so we're not generally increasing these people, or like we're not like increasing these high skilled immigrants by a certain number, we're just decreasing the quota, so that just means like a certain number of people will come inside. Remember that there's a preemption about the way the 1 AR goes on unanswered. The midterm's impact is the only way to win, and the only way is November. It will classify as case for arguments from the 1 AR, the time frame flows app. We increase innovation right now. There are people coming in right now from the country test grant coming in right now that boost the economy. That's a Just 319 card. Temporary immigrants are used, and they're far better than looked at by companies. What means? Here's your laptop back.
All right, nice job. So just a couple things that I just wanted to bring up. For new students that are in policy debate, one thing that you hopefully saw was that our competitors were flowing the entire time when their opponents were speaking. That is really important. I would suggest for new students bringing, several sheets of paper. Our competitors can show you what a flow looks like if you're not quite sure, but it'll really help you to keep track of your arguments so that you know exactly, what you're going to say when you get up to make your speeches. Hopefully you noticed that the students in the beginning did give the order of what they were going to address so that their opponents could, refer back to their notes and really, track the arguments. The one other piece I wanted to just bring up, you heard the students referring to different taglines. That's a good idea to write in your notes when you're flowing. Just, list whoever the author is of the evidence, what the year is, just so that you can refer back to it. Make good use of prep time. So we cut these rounds in half just because of time. So the prep time was 5 minutes. Make good use of that. So don't use all your prep time, after one speech. Try to spread it out, as you need it so that you don't run out of time. And hopefully you picked up on the fact, and one of the competitors did say, I'm going to address this line by line. It is really important to take a good flow so that you can address everything line by line. Because that's really the key to policy debate, knowing exactly what your opponent said and then going back and, refuting that argument. Also keep in mind, just trying to make sure that your opponent's not dropping an argument. If your opponent drops an argument, point that out. So that, you'll be able to see that in some of the rounds. It just strengthens your case if you can point out, any areas that they didn't address. And there are cases too. One thing I've noticed as a judge, you really should have your evidence readily available like these competitors did, so that if during a round, if a competitor challenges one of your cards, you'll at least have it available so that you can show them what the card actually says and, move on. I've been in rounds where I've had students say, oh, well, can I see your card? And the opponent says, let me find it, and then they're shuffling around and trying to find, the file or the paper that has it. So just make sure you have your evidence readily available in case it's needed, if there's any question about it. For the affirmative case, you're really looking at, why does this particular policy work? The negative has the responsibility to look at, you know, the disadvantages and really looking at, you know, the impacts, look at solvency, which these competitors really addressed everything quite well. They had really great arguments. The one thing that I would say for judges, if you're a new judge, just looking back at my notes, as a judge, you really have to keep your personal opinions and all your biases aside. Just vote on how the students presented the arguments, not, you know, what your personal opinion is about the topic. How the students argued, you know, did they effectively refute the opponent's arguments? Did they, you know, did they drop arguments? You know, who was the most convincing person, you know, who was the most convincing as far as sides go? One piece for judges too, there are no oral critiques, so any feedback that you have as a judge, just make sure that it all goes on the ballot. We don't share any, you know, we don't disclose anything to the students at the end of the round. It's fine to simply say, you know, nice job to everybody and, you know, thank you, and everyone moves on. If you do provide oral critiques, it does slow the rounds down and it just delays the entire tournament, so that's why we ask for no oral critiques. And the other thing for judges, it's really important for you to also be flowing so that you can keep track of what the competitors have said, and it just makes it, you've heard, you know, it's a lot more information. I mean, this was only, you know, half, each of these speech times were cut in half, so it's a lot better to just, if you think about, you know, we're doubling it in a normal round, it's a lot of information they're presenting, so just take notes on who's, you know, what their disadvantages are, what the advantages were, any points of solvency that they address, just so that you can refer back to it as you're making your decision. And it's just a lot easier to be able to track, you know, did the neg address this point that the AF made? There might be, as you heard, there may be, you know, counter plans that are brought up, so that's good to take notes on that. Really look at, you know, how did the students present their arguments? Did they have enough evidence? Were they able to explain the evidence clearly, you know, looking at the interpretation of the evidence? There are some cases in policy rounds where you saw that one side will say, oh, well, I have this card, but then the other side will challenge them and say, well, that's not how we interpret that card. And then they'll start reading line by line exactly what the card says. So that's something to keep in mind. But as far as judging goes, it does get easier as you go. Your first time, you might be nervous about it, but it does get a little bit easier. And even with the students, flowing might seem challenging at first, but I'm sure these competitors will tell you it does get easier as you get more practice with it. So, great round. We had some expert debaters in here. If I was judging the round, I would have voted on the side of the negative, but only by a small margin. They were quite excellent debaters. You know, but you heard you know, during the round, they both were going back and forth. They were effectively challenging each other.
Oh wait, you mean like you want to vote on like trying to decrease on economy, like the negative? Wait, sorry. What?
I think she's voting on the side of no, we shouldn't do it on this side.
Yeah.
So like
Not
we should
doing a
not
voting
raise
plan.
economy.
Or we shouldn't
Yeah.
decrease or like destroy the cap on EB visas to bring in immigrants.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's one thing, I mean, you have to really look at, and it might take you a couple minutes as a judge when you're finished, like, okay, I have all this information, what do I want to vote on? There are some times where you may very early on, like in one of the first rebuttals, kind of have an idea of which way to go. But it's really important on the ballot that you give an exact reason as to why you voted the way that you did. You know, was it that someone dropped an argument? Was it, you know, that evidence wasn't clearly presented? Was it that, you know, the arguments really didn't make a lot of sense? But the whole idea is just give the students feedback so that A, they have the feedback so that they can improve next time, and B, so that they will come back and do it again. So really just balance it out, give constructive feedback, find something positive that they did. It could even be, oh, you know, you had a great rebuttal, but you may have wanted to expand on this argument a little bit more to, you know, strengthen your case, you know, anything like that. But it does get easier as you go along. Does anybody have questions about anything that you saw? Anything that students might want to ask? You know, our competitors here, I'm sure, would be happy to answer questions. I can answer questions for anybody for judging or any students.
So what would be the reason for decision here?
I just felt like with this decision that they were they really just nailed it as far as, just clearly identifying the arguments and just effectively challenging their opponents. That's why I, would vote the way I did. But it was a tough round, so there will be some rounds where it'll be pretty easy to decide, and then you'll have some other ones where it might come down to just one little piece that you need to look at. Go ahead.
Like, the people that kind of read their arguments a little bit too fast, so like, I was able to, get my notes down for it. Is that still okay?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So, for new students in policy debate, it might be overwhelming, when you hear the students talking so fast and you're thinking, how am I gonna get all this down? Do the best you can, just try to hit the main points of the arguments. I know in my first policy round as a judge, I kept thinking, oh my gosh, wait a minute. I mean, I heard my students practicing when I was coaching, but I had a student in the first round of policy that was particularly fast, and the student did ask me before the round, do you have any preferences? And I said, speed is okay, but as long as if I can clearly understand you, it's fine, but if you can start going too fast, I may do this. And that's what I had to do, to just kind of say, slow down a little bit. So it's one of those things, just catch as much as you can. But keep in mind too, the students have a lot of information to present, so they may be talking fast, but the goal is to get, the key points down. But that's a really great question. Don't be intimidated by that. That is something that as you, go through and you do more policy rounds, it will get better. You will be able to talk faster, but you will also have to keep in mind that you have to go at a pace that the judge can follow it and that the competitors can follow it. So it's just one of those, it does get better. It might be intimidating, but it'll be fine.
Are today's ballots online?
And typically the debate ballots are online in a lot of the tournaments.
How about today?
The speech ones are usually on paper. I think today they're doing them, I think they were doing them.
Ballot pickup and turn.
There's ballot pickup, so today I think they're doing them all like on paper. But if you have a tab room account, like at certain tournaments, you would do your ballots online. It just depends on the tournament. But the whole idea is for these rounds, it's good that you saw this, sample round. Try to see, other ones if you have, free time. And your first round might be intimidating, but just, do the best you can and know that next time you can always get better. Anybody else have questions about anything? Go ahead.
Does the 1AC or 2AC specifically make a claim that the counterplan solves hedge?
Sorry, what?
Does the 1AC or 2AC make a claim that the counterplan solves the hedge advantage?
No, because I was turning it for the hedge fund as like a net benefit.
Okay.
Kind
I was wondering if there's like a bypass 2AC where they go for just like innovation increases hedge, means counterplan is net benefit.
Yeah, like I had an extra look, I've gone through these terms, but like still have like counterplan cover both advantages. But then I was like, it's like kind of weird, but it's like not necessarily like wrong, because like if you did the app, like it would still link into the net benefit too, but like it would still link into the chart if you did that too, sort of.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because like, we're supposed to do anything if the counterplan solves.
Yeah,
All right, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Let's give our debaters a round of applause. Great job. And if anybody has questions for me or for the debaters, feel free to, stop and ask us.